If you were driving an ambulance on an icy winter morning and a scruffy dog suddenly blocked your path, barking and refusing to move, would you stop? That's what happened at 6:42 a.m. on a quiet road just outside of Bangor, Maine. The streets were slick with black ice, the sky still gray with night, and Dana Walker was behind the wheel, heading toward a routine emergency call. But what she encountered that morning wasn't routine at all. A brown and white mutt darted in front of her vehicle, stared straight through the windshield, and began howling. Not barking. Howling, long, desperate, human-like sounds that froze Dana's hand on the siren controls. Something was wrong. Dana had been an EMT for 18 years. She had seen overdoses, car crashes, heart attacks, and everything in between. But nothing had ever made her pause like this. The dog didn't seem feral or panicked, it seemed intentional, focused. It stood in the middle of the road, its body trembling from cold and stress, yet it refused to move. The moment Dana tried to inch the ambulance forward, the dog barked, ran 10 feet ahead, and turned back, staring again. It was guiding her, calling her. Her partner, James, grumbled in the passenger seat, "What the hell is it doing?" But Dana didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the dog. That morning had started like all the others. Dana poured stale coffee into her thermos, avoided looking at the framed picture of her daughter on the counter, and stepped into the freezing dark. It had been almost a year since she lost Emily, not to death, but to silence. After a painful falling out over Dana's long hours and broken promises, her daughter stopped calling. That silence had become a second skin. Work was her only escape. On duty, she was strong, competent, needed. Off duty, she was invisible. Alone, the ambulance had become her second home, and routine had become her way of surviving. So when the dog appeared, shattering that routine, it cracked something in her. She couldn't ignore it. Against every rule in the book, she turned off the siren, pulled the wheel sharply, and followed the animal. James protested. "This is crazy, we've got a call." But Dana shook her head. "This is the call," she muttered. The dog was limping, one of its back legs dragging slightly, leaving a faint trail in the fresh snow. But it moved with purpose, ducking through a narrow alley between abandoned houses and pausing just long enough to make sure Dana was still behind. The alley opened into a neglected yard, rusted lawn chairs, an old swing set barely holding onto its chains, and silence so thick Dana could hear her own breath. The dog ran to a pile of overturned garbage bins and began barking madly, tail stiff, ears pinned back. Dana stepped out into the cold, crunching over ice, her boots slipping slightly. She heard a sound, then faint, raspy and human. A cough, then a weak groan. James's voice came from behind. "You've got to be kidding me." But Dana was already moving, dropping to her knees and pulling aside the frozen tarp covering the bins. Beneath it, curled in a fetal position, was a man, mid-60s. His lips were blue, his hands bare, skin pale. He was breathing, barely. Dana leaned in, checked his pulse, slow, thready. Hypothermia was setting in fast. His clothes were soaked through. No wallet, no phone. Just a small gold chain peeking out from his collar. The dog was beside her now, whining, nudging the man's arm with its nose. It didn't bark anymore, it just waited, eyes flicking between Dana and the man. Dana radioed dispatch, found an unconscious male. Unknown cause, hypothermic. "We're initiating transport." She wrapped the man in blankets while James brought the stretcher. The dog refused to leave his side. Even when they lifted the man onto the gurney, the animal pressed against it, trying to climb up. Dana hesitated, then opened the back door of the ambulance. "Come on," she said softly. The dog jumped in without hesitation and curled up right beside the man's legs. James looked annoyed, but didn't argue. Something about the scene didn't feel like a rescue. It felt like a reunion, like the dog had been guarding this man, protecting him through the night, and wasn't about to let him go. Inside the hospital, nurses rushed in as the stretcher rolled down the hall. Vitals were crashing. Dana stayed back, watching through the glass. The dog paced at her side, ears twitching with every noise, eyes never leaving the doors that closed behind the medical team. A nurse glanced at the animal, then at Dana. "Is that his dog?" Dana paused, then nodded. "I think it's the reason he's alive." Outside, snow had started to fall again, slow, heavy flakes that blanketed everything in silence. Dana stood there, hand resting on the dog's head. And for the first time in months, she felt something break inside her. Not pain, not grief, something else, something like hope. And then came the name. An orderly brought out a worn leather wallet found deep in the man's inner coat pocket. ID card, Robert L. Carter, age 68. Dana blinked. That name meant something. She didn't know how or why, but she felt it in her chest. She sat down next to the dog, still shivering but silent now, and whispered, "We're not going anywhere, okay?" The dog didn't respond. It simply laid its head in her lap. And in that moment, with machines beeping behind the hospital wall and snow falling like a second chance, Dana understood. The real emergency hadn't been in the dispatch call. It had been waiting in that alley, inside both of them, all along. The hospital room was dim and quiet, save for the slow, rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor. Robert Carter lay motionless beneath warm blankets, and saline in his arm, oxygen in his nose. His body was still fighting to reheat itself. But the dog hadn't moved from the foot of the bed. He sat like a soldier on watch, eyes fixed on Robert's face, tail twitching only when someone entered the room. The nurses tried to coax him out, even offered food, but he refused. Every time they touched Robert, he growled a low, uncertain warning. Dana stayed close, acting as a translator between the human world and the dog's stubborn devotion. Dana found herself watching the dog more than the monitors. He was injured. There was a visible gash on his hind leg, deep enough to concern her. His ribs were visible, his coat clumped with dirt and dried blood. She asked the front desk if animal control had been notified. They nodded. Standard procedure. But something in her sank. Animal control would take him to a shelter. If Robert didn't wake up, the dog would be alone again. She couldn't explain why that thought hurt so much. Maybe because it mirrored her own story, a survivor no one knew what to do with. Later that morning, after her shift ended, Dana stood outside the entrance and dialed her daughter. She hadn't tried in months. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Hey Em, it's Mom. I helped someone today. Well, I think he helped me, actually. I don't know. Call me when you can." She hung up and didn't expect a reply, but the act of calling left her shaken. For years, Dana had made herself numb. Work, silence, sleep, repeat. But that dog's cry in the road had cracked through her armor like nothing else ever had. Back inside, a vet technician finally arrived. Dana expected resistance from the dog, but instead, he stood up, limped over, and sat down in front of the tech. As if saying, "Do what you need to, just let me stay close." They examined him in the hallway. The wound was infected. He needed stitches and antibiotics. The vet hesitated. "If he doesn't belong to someone, we'll have to take him in for quarantine," Dana interrupted before she could finish. "He belongs to someone. That man in there, he belongs to him. He waited outside in the snow all night. That's not a stray. That's loyalty." James reappeared later that day with a grim expression. "Dispatch wants to talk to you. You left a call in progress to chase a dog." "That's a reportable incident," Dana nodded, heart sinking. She knew the rules. Abandoning a dispatch could get her suspended or worse. But she couldn't lie. "I followed my instincts," she said quietly. "And if I hadn't, that man would be dead." James sighed. "I get it. I do. But it's not going to be easy." As he walked away, Dana looked down at the dog now curled beside her feet. "Nothing worth it ever is," she whispered. That night, she stayed at the hospital long after visiting hours. She sat in the chair beside Robert's bed while the dog slept under it, only occasionally raising his head to check that Robert was still there. Dana brought a blanket and curled up in her chair, listening to the sound of breathing, the soft hum of machines, and the occasional thunder of her own heart. She wondered who Robert was. No family had called. No one had come. The world hadn't noticed he was missing, except for one broken, loyal dog. In the morning, the nurse on duty brought Dana a file. "We found something." Inside was a photo, slightly faded. It showed Robert, smiling, on a porch with a much younger version of the dog beside him. In the background, trees, a lake, and a small wooden cabin. "He used to be a forest ranger," the nurse explained, "retired a few years ago. Lived alone in a remote cabin, no emergency contacts." Dana stared at the photo, then at the sleeping dog. "He came all that way," she murmured. He found help because no one else was coming. The vet returned with news. The dog had a microchip. His name was Tucker. Registered to Robert Carter, address matching the cabin mentioned in the file. Dana smiled for the first time in days. It made sense now. Tucker hadn't just stumbled onto a street. He had led them to Robert. Maybe he'd seen him collapse. Maybe he tried to wake him. But when nothing worked, he'd gone for help. Across snow, traffic, fences. Injured, hungry, afraid, but determined. It wasn't just a coincidence. It was love in its purest form. Then came the decision Dana hadn't expected. Hospital administration called her in. The dog can't stay here indefinitely, the director said. Unless he's claimed, he'll need to be removed by noon. Dana looked at the clock. It was 10:46 a.m. She walked back to the room, her stomach tight. Tucker sat with his head on the bed, unmoving. Robert was still unconscious. Dana knelt beside him, one hand on Tucker's back. "I can't let them take you," she said softly. She stood, took a breath, and went to the front desk. "I'll take him. He can stay with me. I'll sign whatever's needed." As the paperwork printed, Dana felt something unfamiliar to her. Taking in a dog meant more than shelter. It meant responsibility, connection. It meant opening a door she had kept closed since Emily left. But when Tucker walked beside her into the cold morning air, his tail wagging faintly, she knew she couldn't walk away. Not from him, not from this. She didn't know if Robert would wake up. She didn't know if Emily would ever call. But she knew this: Tucker had saved a life, and now, Dana needed to save his. The first night with Tucker at her apartment was awkward and quiet. He didn't explore, didn't sniff around like most dogs would. Instead, he found a corner near the front door, curled into himself, and stayed perfectly still. Dana tried coaxing him with food-cooked chicken, soft rice, but he only sniffed it once and turned his head. She left a bowl of water beside him and sat on the couch, unsure of what to do next. The silence in the room was heavy, not empty, but filled with questions neither of them knew how to ask. Dana looked over at him and whispered, "You miss him too, huh?" The next morning, she took him to her vet. The cut was healing well, and the antibiotics had started to work. The vet commented on Tucker's age, probably 9 or 10, and said his body showed signs of stress, hunger, and exhaustion, but not neglect. "He's been loved," the vet said gently. Dana nodded, her throat tight. "He has." She bought supplies, bowls, a leash, a new bed, but Tucker ignored them all. That night, Dana found him curled again by the door, as if waiting for someone who wasn't coming. She sat down next to him. "He's still fighting. And so are you." "So am I." 2 days later, Robert opened his eyes. A nurse called Dana immediately. She arrived at the hospital just as he was being checked by a doctor. His voice was weak but clear. The first thing he said wasn't "Where am I?" It was "Where's Tucker?" Dana stepped forward, heart pounding. "He's safe. He led us to you. He saved your life." Robert's eyes flooded with tears. He nodded slowly, the emotion too big for words. "I knew he'd try," he said, voice cracking. "I told him to go if I didn't get up. He never listens." Dana sat beside the bed, smiling through tears. "This time, not listening saved you." Word of the story started to spread. A nurse posted about Tucker on Facebook. Local media picked it up. By the end of the week, a reporter from Channel 8 News asked to interview Dana and Robert. They agreed, reluctantly. The segment aired that Friday. Hero dog saves owner's life in Maine winter storm. Viewers cried. Donations came in to cover Robert's hospital bills. A local pet store offered to supply Tucker with food for life. Strangers sent cards, toys, and letters. One simply read, "He didn't just find help. He became the help." Dana kept that one on her fridge. With Robert still in recovery, Tucker remained with Dana. Over time, he began to thaw. He started sleeping near her bed instead of the door. He followed her into the kitchen. One morning, when she left her boots out by accident, she found him curled up next to them, as if waiting for her to return. When she came home late after a long shift, he greeted her at the door, tail wagging softly. The quiet companionship was something Dana hadn't realized she needed. Not until it was there, breathing, warm, waiting. Her coworkers began noticing the change. James commented one afternoon, "You're smiling more." "What happened?" Dana laughed, brushing it off. But something had changed. She found herself more patient, more present. She called Emily again, left another message. "I got a dog. It's a long story. Maybe you'd like him." She didn't expect a reply, but she kept trying. And every time she hit call, Tucker would rest his chin on her leg, as if giving silent encouragement. There was no judgment in his eyes, just steady, quiet belief. A week later, Emily replied, "Just a text, hey, heard about the dog. Call me tomorrow." Dana stared at the screen for a long time. Then she put the phone down and whispered, "Thank you, Tucker." That night, she cried for everything she had lost, everything she had buried, and everything she might still reclaim. Tucker sat beside her, leaned in, and rested his head in her lap. No one moved. No one needed to. For the first time in what felt like years, Dana didn't feel hollow. She felt human. On his 12th day in recovery, Robert asked to see Dana and Tucker together. The hospital allowed a visit in the courtyard. Robert sat bundled in a wheelchair, thin but smiling. Tucker saw him from 10 feet away and bolted. The way he jumped into Robert's lap carefully but urgently made every nurse stop in their tracks. He whimpered and licked Robert's face, tail wagging so hard it knocked over a potted plant. Robert wept openly, hands in Tucker's fur, saying his name over and over again. Dana stood back, letting the moment unfold like something sacred. As they sat in the cold sun, Robert looked at Dana. "I don't know why he went for help. He never left my side before," Dana smiled, "because he knew someone out there would care enough to follow him." "That's what love looks like," Robert nodded, voice hoarse. "I owe you everything." Dana looked at Tucker, then back at Robert. "We owe him." That moment, simple and unpolished, was more than a reunion. It was a quiet redemption for Robert, for Tucker, and for Dana. 3 broken beings, stitched back together by loyalty, instinct, and love. Robert Carter was discharged 3 weeks later with a new cane, a stack of follow-up appointments, and something far more important, hope. Dana offered to drive him home, and Tucker rode in the back seat, occasionally licking Robert's ear over the shoulder. The old man chuckled, his voice still raspy but full of life. "I thought I'd never see home again," he murmured. Dana gave a half-smile. "Your dog had other plans." When they pulled into the long gravel driveway leading to Robert's cabin, the forest seemed to welcome them back. Even the wind through the trees felt different, like a breath held too long, finally released. The cabin was worn but sturdy, just like Robert. Dana helped him inside, and Tucker immediately began sniffing everything, tail high. His bed was still by the fireplace, untouched. His water bowl still half full. Robert leaned on the table for balance, watching Tucker reclaim his place like a king returning from exile. "He waited for me," Robert said softly. "Even after I told him to go." Dana looked around the small, quiet space. He listened to what mattered. Before she left, Robert held her hand. "You didn't just follow a dog. You saved a man. That counts for something." Dana returned to her life, but everything had changed. She no longer rushed through her shifts. She started making time for her neighbors, for her coworkers, and most importantly, for herself. Tucker stayed with Robert, but Dana visited every weekend. They took short walks near the cabin, and Tucker always trotted between them like a bridge holding their lives together. The silence that used to haunt Dana now felt full of meaning. On one visit, Robert gave her a photo, the 3 of them, sitting on the cabin porch, smiling. On the back, he had written, "No one saves alone." Emily finally called. The first conversation was stiff, careful, but it was real. They talked about school, about memories, and eventually, about Tucker. "He sounds like a good dog," Emily said. Dana's voice trembled. He's more than that." A week later, Emily visited. When she met Tucker, he didn't bark, he just walked up, sniffed her shoes, and sat at her feet. Emily knelt down and stroked his ears. "I like him." Dana stood in the doorway, arms crossed tightly over her chest, fighting tears. Emily glanced up. "You can stop trying to fix everything all at once." This is a start. Back in town, people still remembered the story. Dana was invited to speak at a local community center. The theme was resilience. She brought a picture of Tucker and Robert, and told the story not as a hero, but as someone who had been lost and lucky enough to be found. One man in the crowd raised his hand. "Why did you stop the ambulance?" "Why that dog?" Dana thought for a long moment. because he looked like he knew where pain lived. And I did too. The room was silent after that. But several people lined up afterward not to talk about dogs, but to talk about grief. Robert began writing letters to the local newspaper, short reflections on growing old, on isolation, and on the loyalty of animals. One column was titled "The Dog Who Waited." In it, he wrote, "When you live alone long enough, you start to believe no one will come." Tucker proved me wrong, readers responded. Elderly neighbors reached out, some visited. A few even adopted animals of their own. One woman, 78, sent Robert a photo of her and her new cat. The caption read, "Because your story made me believe in second chances." Dana and Tucker remained inseparable during her visits. Over time, Tucker's limp faded, his coat grew glossy, and he began playing again small things, like chasing leaves or digging by the river. Dana watched him one afternoon and whispered, "You're healing too, aren't you?" She saw it in herself as well. She started sleeping better, laughing more. Her apartment no longer felt like a waiting room. She hung pictures again, called friends back. When someone at work asked if she was okay, she didn't say "I'm fine." She said, "I'm getting there." And she meant it. Years later, after Robert passed peacefully in his sleep, Tucker went home with Dana for good. He was older, slower, but still had that same light in his eyes, the one that said, "I know you." Dana placed Robert's photo on her shelf, beside a new one of Emily and Tucker together. She didn't cry, she just sat on the floor, and Tucker rested his head on her lap, like always. She whispered, "You were never just a dog. You were a map." He blinked, as if he understood. Maybe he did. Some things don't need translation. In the spring, Dana helped organize a local program called Loyal Companions, pairing shelter animals with seniors living alone. The project gained traction, even inspired a statewide initiative. News outlets picked it up again. Dana spoke, once more, at a gathering, this time not about trauma, but about possibility. "Sometimes, the ones who seem lost are the ones who carry the way forward," she said. "You just have to be willing to follow." That line became the motto of the program. Printed on shirts, posters, even a bench outside the shelter, "Be willing to follow." And in the quiet moments, after all the noise and headlines faded, it was just Dana and Tucker. Morning coffee, evening walks, Sundays with Emily, small things, the kind that once felt impossible. Healing didn't arrive like a flood. It came like Tucker had, limping, quiet, persistent. A reminder that even the coldest winters end, and even the loneliest hearts can thaw. The dog who once blocked an ambulance had opened 100 doors without even knowing it. Not with barks or noise, but with presence. With love, with loyalty that refused to let go. He didn't just save a man, he led to broken souls back to life.